Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It's hard to think, Thursday, July 6th, 2023 at 1 p.m. and we are here for an allowable ex parte communication briefing. Let's take a roll call of the commissioners who are present today. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Caston, Commissioner Irvin, Commissioner Carolee Williams, and present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Thomas and Chair Belser. Before we get into the merits, let's go ahead. Let's take just appearances at this time. Mr. Elliott, welcome today.
Madam Chair, I'm Scott Elliott. I'm here on behalf of Texican National.
You're not on. You're not on. Is it? I don't know that a light shows. Just try the microphone again, please. Okay.
No. I'll do it.
We were just trying to make sure you were on your toes.
It had to be something easy, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a mulligan here. So, Madam Chair, I'm Scott Elliott. I'm here on behalf of Texican Natural Gas Company. I would take a moment, if I may, to thank the Commission for allowing us to appear this afternoon for this allowable ex parte briefing. I would thank the staff.
Just a moment. Just appearances right now.
Thank you. Ma'am.
We need a break to take up a technical matter. We will resume shortly. We're at ease for a few minutes as we work on a technical issue. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome back to the Public Service Commission. I apologize. We had a little technical difficulty that we needed to correct. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room are Chair Belser and Commissioner Thomas, and with us virtually we have Commissioner Carolee Williams, Commissioner Irvin, and Commissioner Caston. We started with appearances, and we started with Mr. Elliott. Do you want to go ahead and just give us your appearance again?
If I may. Madam Chair, I'm Scott Elliott. I represent Texican Natural Gas Company in this ex parte proceeding.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott. And who's here with the Office of Regulatory Staff?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Nicole Given appearing on behalf of the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff.
Okay, before we get into our giving our instructions, we have a good bit of information we have to put out on the record. Are there any other preliminary matters that need to come before us before we begin our instructions?
No,
okay.
ma'am.
I'm going to recognize our staff counsel, Ms. Alicia Clausen, to give some of the parameters of an ex parte communication briefing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners, and to all who are present today. Today is July 6th, 2023, and we are here in the Commission's hearing room pursuant to a notice of request for allowable ex parte communication briefing in 2023-70-G from Robert Gray on behalf of Texican Natural Gas Company regarding natural gas market in South Carolina. This matter has been noticed on the Commission's website as required by South Carolina Code Annotated Section 58-3-260-C6. The subject matter notice to be discussed today relates to Robert Gray on behalf of Texican Natural Gas Company briefing on natural gas market in South Carolina. I would remind everyone that this is a briefing and not a hearing. This briefing must be conducted in compliance with the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 58-3-260C, and the requirements of that statute are, in part, that the allowable ex parte briefing be confined to the subject matter which has been noticed. Therefore, I would ask the presenters, commissioners, and staff to please refrain from discussing any matters not related to the specific topic. The statute prohibits any presenter, commissioners, or commission staff from requesting or giving any commitment, predetermination, or prediction regarding any action by any commissioner as to an ultimate issue which either is or is likely to come before the commission. Please keep in mind that an evidentiary hearing in Dominion Energy of South Carolina's natural gas rate case is scheduled to begin August 21st, 2023. I would also ask the presenters, staff, and commissioners to refrain from referencing any report, article, statute, or document of any kind that is not included in today's presentation. A copy of any document which is referenced during the briefing must be provided to the Office of Regulatory Staff for inclusion into the record, which will be certified to the Chief Clerk of the Commission, Ms. Jocelyn Boyd. If anyone during the course of this briefing exceeds the scope or does not comply with or fails to conduct themselves within the provisions of South Carolina Code Section 58-3-260 governing allowable ex parte briefings, it is expected that a contemporaneous objection will be made. And finally, everyone in attendance today must sign in and register. Everyone in the hearing room must also read, sign, and return the form which you were given at the door. It is required by law for each attendee to certify that the requirements contained in Section 58-3-260C have been complied with in this presentation. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Clausen. Ms. Given, as a representative of the Office of Regulatory Staff, do you have any additional cautions or remarks with regard to?
No, Madam Chair,
the
Ms.
parameters?
Clausen covered it very thoroughly in her instructions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Given. Mr. Elliott, I'm going to recognize you again to introduce your clients.
Just briefly, Madam Chair. Once again, I'd like to thank the Commission in particular for working with my client to set and establish this ex parte briefing this afternoon. I would particularly like to thank the staff who are most helpful and cooperative in allowing us and helping us to set this matter up. As we proceed, we have two speakers from Texaco Natural Gas Company, Mr. Aubrey Hilliard and Mr. Robert Gray. Mr. Hilliard will introduce the topic and turn it over to Mr. Gray to conclude. So with that, I would thank you once again for hearing us out this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Elliott, and I appreciate your kind remarks about the staff. They have to wear many hats and do many jobs, and we're very fortunate with the work that they do.
And most important, they've got to put up with Scott Elliott. So.
I wasn't going to say that. Mr. Hilliard, welcome.
Thank you. And thank you very much for taking some time to listen to us today. We actually made this presentation to the regulatory staff, a few weeks ago, and they highly encouraged us to set up an ex parte meeting with you to share some of our thoughts because first of all, Texaco Natural Gas, we have customers in the state. We feel like South Carolina is probably the most business-friendly state that we ever do business in. And when we saw the governor's order, we recognized that he and his staff also recognized that there is a direct correlation between the availability of abundant and affordable energy and the growth of your GDP. And if you're going to continue to grow this great state, then his executive order was something that really resonated with us. And so we recognize that for that to come to fruition, it's not just natural gas. It's not just, you're going to have to grow electricity. There will be roads and highways and water, all these sorts of things. And thank goodness I'm not the person that has to make all those decisions. But we are experts in the natural gas business. And we recognize a very unique system here in South Carolina that's unlike your other southeastern states that will be competing for the same industries and residents that want to come here. And so we want to talk about the system as it is today and how we envision it, how it could be in the future to match the Governor McMaster's order for energy. So a little bit about background on Texaco. Texaco is a privately owned company. We're one of the largest natural gas marketers that's privately owned in America. We've been in business since the dawn of deregulation in 1985. And we like to pride ourselves in the fact that as a privately owned company, we are concerned about our customers' needs. So everything comes from customer to us. What can we do to make our customer more successful? And that's your industrial customer, to make them more successful so they'll grow and be more profitable. And as opposed to a lot of the publicly owned companies that we compete against who their board of directors and their management set the agendas to enrich the shareholders. And so it comes from a top-down thing rather than customer up. So we have a bias, I will tell you, that's about serving the residents and the industry that's in your area. As for me personally, I am the president of Texican Carolinas division. I've been in the energy industry my entire adult life. Right shortly after college, I got in the drilling business. I drill wells in Permian Basin in West Texas, the Fort Worth Basin in North Texas, and I still participate in some drilling activities today. In the mid '80s, when they started deregulating the interstate pipelines, I looked at my position and said, I kind of know this business from the drill bit to the burner tip, and it'd be a great time to take advantage of the relationships I have with major oil and gas companies, with independent producers, and being a native of the Carolinas, for me to come back and be able to work with industrial customers in the Carolinas and begin that early business of marketing gas to industrial customers to make them more profitable. So I started the business in the early '90s and built the largest natural gas marketing company in the Carolinas during that period, merged it with Texican in 2000. And since the mid-'90s, I've put out a weekly newsletter called Energy Update that I'm happy to say is seen on every continent except Antarctica, where they don't have gas buyers. And one of the things we specialize in is things like hedging strategies and just updating our customer base and friends on what's going on in the energy business, because there's so much change that's coming forward. And now I'm at a lucky time in my life when I can give back to the industry, and so I'm involved in things like renewable natural gas, forestry for carbon offsets, and also being involved in things like today, where you can sit here and hopefully take all my experience and share it to hopefully make this market, make everything in the governor's order come true in a wonderful way. I'm very fortunate to have Robert Gray here with me, and Robert is a graduate of University of Virginia and Harvard MBA. He spent several years in private equity and, in fact, was the CFO of a manufacturing company when we managed to bring him over about 10 years ago. And I'm going to say that you're in for not only an informative but enjoyable presentation today, because there's no one that knows the South Carolina natural gas business more completely than Robert does. And I say that because if you work for a regulated monopoly, you're generally in a silo and you know something extremely well, but not the whole picture. And then even if you're in upper management and you feel like you've got the whole picture from procurement to delivery, you don't live with the end user and know how that manufacturing firm needs gas. And I sit in my office every day and listen down the hallway as he talks to DESC and CGT and Transco and Sonat, and then talks with the customers who run their business in these states and coordinate their gas needs. So I think you're going to really enjoy getting a great insight into the unique gas system that South Carolina has. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Robert Gray.
Thank you very much, Aubrey. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. We have about 30 slides today, so we may move a little quickly, but wanted to go through the agenda first. We'll review Governor McMaster's order, which there is a copy of in the back of the room for anybody who would like one. We'll go through the current natural gas supply chain from wellhead to burner tip in general, and then we'll go through the pipelines that serve this great state specifically in great detail. We'll talk through the capacity on those pipelines and how that affects the end price. We'll talk about the importance of natural gas for power generation, which is a relatively new development over the last decade or 15 years. Come back to the pipeline constraints and then have plenty of time for questions at the end. The governor's order, I was very enthused. I was at the press conference where he released the order, and industry has clearly had a transformative role for this state between Boeing, Michelin, BMW, the supply chains that have come along with those large industrials and the tens of thousands of jobs those created. And so the governor's executive order recognized that historically, and also we've seen so many economic development announcements here over the last couple years, whether it's solar, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's conventional vehicles. As the governor likes to say, he mandates coordination, collaboration, and cooperation to prepare for these times. The next page here, I won't read all of this, but I will draw attention to the second to last highlighted point here, addressing the existing limitations on the state's ability to receive and capability to utilize natural gas. And before we launch into the pipelines and logistics of natural gas marketing, and natural gas marketing is not rocket science, I promise you that. But it does have its own vocabulary, so wanted to make sure that we were all speaking with the same vocabulary terms here. The standard unit of measure in our industry is a decatherm, which is 1 million BTUs. That's 1,000 standard cubic feet of natural gas at normal atmospheric temperatures. Often when we're presenting to customers, customers find it easier to visualize alternate forms of energy that they're more familiar with. So a decatherm is 1 million BTUs, is 8 gallons of gasoline, 7 gallons of diesel, or 11 gallons of propane. And as I'm sure you all have done the math in your head, if gasoline is close to $4 a gallon, and you can get 1 decatherm is 8 gallons of gasoline. Natural gas is some extraordinarily cheap energy at this point. So broadly, the natural gas supply chain, there are production areas, which historically have been Texas and Louisiana. Recently, as I'm sure you've read, there's been production growth, tremendous production growth in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, and about 1/3 of U.S. production is now coming from the Northeast. Unfortunately, there's no production of natural gas in the great state of South Carolina, so the state of South Carolina relies on federally regulated interstate gas pipelines to bring that gas, bring those molecules from the production areas through pipelines to this state. The main pipelines serving this state are Southern Natural Gas Pipeline, which runs from Louisiana to Aiken, South Carolina, Transcontinental Gas Pipeline, which runs from Texas to New York City, and we'll go into much more detail on that exciting pipeline later. And then Carolina Gas Transmission, where 99% of that pipe is within the state of South Carolina, but it does cross the Georgia border to reach Elba Island. So that is federally regulated, and that pipeline essentially brings gas from the borders of the state further into the heart of the state. Those pipelines connect to the local distribution companies or utilities, such as Piedmont Natural Gas, serving the upstate, and Dominion Energy South Carolina, serving most of the rest of the state, as well as various municipal systems, such as the city of Orangeburg or Bennettsville. Moving on to slide 10 here. Our role in the market as natural gas marketers is that we purchase molecules in these production areas. We own, lease, and manage interstate pipeline capacity to bring those molecules to the demand area. And those molecules in natural gas are primarily methane, CH4. There's a small amount of pentane and hexane and other things, but it's almost entirely methane. And then we sell those molecules in the demand area. So what our business is, to put it simply, is we break bulk in interstate pipeline capacity. We buy large chunks of Transco capacity, for example, cut it up into 200 little pieces, mark it up, sell that onto our customers, and sell it to them more cheaply than they could go out and buy little pieces of pipeline capacity themselves. Because of the competitive nature of our business, supply from a marketer is generally cheaper than utility supply. So in most areas, industrial customers of a certain size who are deemed sophisticated by nature of that size are able to choose between utility supply or supply from somebody like us. Another benefit that customers receive from working with someone like us is the ability to lock price by hedging. And that can be done using forward contracts on the New York Mercantile Exchange or Intercontinental Exchange. So an industrial customer choosing to work with us would have the ability to lock their prices 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years into the future, rather than buying at a price that they do not control. How molecules are priced in South Carolina. What this chart shows is that there are really two components. There's the commodity cost, which is a national benchmark established at Henry Hub in Louisiana, which is where about 15 different pipelines cross and take molecules all over the country from there. So it makes for a natural index pricing point. And then the cost to move those molecules, to transport those molecules, is what we call basis, but you could call transportation cost. So one noteworthy thing about this chart is that you'll notice the spaghetti of pipelines pretty much all over the country, except for the Carolinas. So the Carolinas, as this showed, truly do suffer from a lack of choices in pipelines. You can see the pipe feeding into Aiken, that's Southern Natural, which we discussed, and the one that goes through the upstate and through North Carolina, that's Transcontinental Gas Pipeline, Transco. We'll dive into the commodity cost component first. And so this is a monthly price that is determined 3 days before each month starts. So the July contract was the price for that was set at the end of June when the contract stopped trading, and that was $2.60. And what this chart here shows is looking back the last 18 years, how each of those monthly prices have been set. And you see back in the early 2000s, so much production was coming from the Gulf of Mexico, and those were hurricanes that came through the Gulf. The rigs of the Gulf of Mexico had to be shut down. Workers pulled off the rigs, and there was truly a shortage of molecules, pushing up those prices. And then you'll notice the 10 years of very low and very stable prices, which has been a tremendous boon for industry in the U.S. Those low stable prices were really caused by 3 technologies. Horizontal drilling, where instead of drilling straight down, drillers figured out how to drill down a mile, turn the bit, and follow a seam of gas and extract from that. Hydraulic fracturing, which is breaking up tight rock to release molecules. And then the third technology is better seismic, meaning that drilling wells used to be kind of like buying lottery tickets, where you would drill the well not knowing exactly what you would get out of it. But better seismic technology allowed engineers to see what was beneath the earth. And drilling wells is now more like buying capital equipment, where you know how much money you're going to put into the well, whether it's $5 million or $10 million, and you have a pretty good idea of the hydrocarbons that will come from it. And that brings us to the recent spike, and that was brought about by extraordinarily low storage levels, surging LNG exports, so liquefied natural gas. The U.S. started exporting that to share our bounty with the rest of the world, but that unfortunately has created more demand for domestic molecules, and so those two pieces, the low storage levels and surging exports, unfortunately set the table for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which upended global energy markets, and through the mechanism of liquefied natural gas, created a link between U.S. markets and international markets, which previously were not closely linked. The New York Mercantile Exchange trades contracts for each month of delivery 10 years into the future. So this is what the red line depicts, is where futures contracts are currently trading. So you could go out and buy gas for delivery in, let's say, March of 2026 for something like $4 per decatherm. So the financial markets are showing that the panic from the last couple years is hopefully behind us at this point, and the U.S. can return to relatively low and stable natural gas prices. Moving into which pipelines serve the state of South Carolina. The brown pipe on this page, that's Transcontinental Gas Pipeline. The red pipe is Southern Natural. The purple pipe, which is a little bit hard to see, that is Elba Express, which at this point primarily takes Transco gas to Elba Island to be liquefied for export. And then the blue line here is Carolina Gas Transmission, and we'll discuss all of these in much greater detail. But you can see the role here of Carolina Gas bringing gas from the borders of the state deeper into the state. Southern Natural Gas Pipeline. So when South Carolina received gas service, Southern Natural was what brought it here. The system that's currently in place was built to primarily rely on Southern Natural Gas Pipeline. And when you think about this pipeline, you can picture it as a funnel where the pipe in Louisiana is very large and it gets progressively thinner as it moves towards Aiken. And so that last piece of pipe that crosses the Savannah River is extraordinarily constrained and has become more so in recent years, where it used to be that if you could get gas to Rennes, Georgia, where Elba Express crosses, then you could get the gas across to Aiken, but that's no longer the case. So SONAT's very constrained. And one thing I would add here is that on peak days, there is no gas to be bought at the end of the pipe. So if you were out in the market on that frigid Christmas Eve we have last year looking for supply in Aiken at the end of the SONAT pipeline, there were zero sellers. And there have been times like that in the past as well. Transcontinental Gas Pipeline, which we call Transco. There we go. As I mentioned, this was originally built to send Texas gas north and east towards New York City. With the proliferation of production in Pennsylvania and West Virginia, this pipeline is now bidirectional. So it pushes gas south and west from the northeast, and it pushes gas northeast from the south central region. And so this is not a single pipe. It's actually, in most places in this area, 4 48-inch pipelines running at about 1,000 pounds per square inch of pressure, so very high pressure. So some of those are running northeast, some are running southwest, and Transco is working hard to accommodate the production and demand needs. Transco feeds into Carolina Gas Transmission in 2 places, in Grover, near the North Carolina border, and in Moore. Unlike the SONAT market, there is a liquid market in Transco molecules, and what I mean by that is not liquid in the sense of a liquid versus gas, but I mean that on Christmas Eve, there were sellers. Despite the rolling blackouts, there were folks who had molecules to sell on those days. Carolina Gas Transmission. So the red number 1 and the red number 2 on this map, those are the interconnects with Transco. The green number 3, which is right next to the red number 5, that's the connection in Aiken with SONAT. And then you see there are also connections near Savannah, Georgia, with Elba Express and Elba LNG. Some other noteworthy points on this map, the green 4 and green 5, those are places where Dominion Energy South Carolina owns LNG. So they have millions of gallons of liquefied natural gas that they can regasify on peak days. Those are wonderful assets for the state to have. If you think about the hydraulics of this pipeline and where so much of the demand is, so much of the population growth and industrial growth has come near the Charleston area. And if you look and try to trace how Transco supply would get to the Charleston area, you would see that you would have to make a hairpin turn essentially through the Aiken compressor station, which would increase the pressure on the pipeline extremely high at that point, which would make it very difficult to bring new supply into Aiken when the pressure on that pipeline at that point is so high. So that makes Transco expansions into South Carolina very, very challenging. So additional gas to reach the low country would most easily either come through Aiken or through the Savannah area, rather than coming from the upstate through Transco. Mountain Valley Pipeline has been in the news here recently. U.S. Congress, in the most recent debt ceiling raise, actually helped facilitate its completion, and that will be completed by the end of this year, 2023, and will deliver 2 million decatherms of West Virginia gas into Southern Virginia. So Transco Station 165 is the endpoint of that pipeline. So Mountain Valley Pipeline does not even quite get gas to North Carolina, let alone South Carolina. There's been a proposed extension project that is a separate FERC project that's in the yellowish orange on this map. And there could be additional Transco expansion projects to bring gas from that 165 point in Southern Virginia further south. But as we've learned here, federally regulated pipeline projects have recently taken a very long time. Mountain Valley, I think it will be close to 7 years from when the first FERC filing was done until its completion date. Of the 2 million decatherms, it's noteworthy that a utility in Virginia, Dominion, Virginia, has announced a hope to build a 1 gigawatt facility in Chesterfield County, Virginia. And a facility of that size would take about 200,000 decatherms a day, if not more. Duke is presumably also working on several plants in the Carolinas. So 2 million decatherms, it's an awful lot of gas, but a few power plants can make a very large dent in that very, very quickly. We've heard of the capacity constraints on these pipes. And so what this chart shows is the free market spot price of 1 decatherm of gas every day for the last 2 years. And so gas is generally traded day ahead. So the gas for tomorrow, July 7th, was traded this morning, July 6th. So these are the prices that were set the day ahead for every day. And the red here is Henry Hub, the national benchmark point that we talked about. The black is a pricing point called Transco Zone 5 South, which is the Carolinas. And you'll see here Christmas Eve of last year, let's say, a million BTUs of natural gas at Henry Hub were something like $7, and a million BTUs of gas here in the Carolinas were about 10 times that much. What that doesn't show is that same day gas on Christmas Eve, so if you were out in the market on Christmas Eve, we saw transactions over $140. So 20 times the cost of the national benchmark price is what market participants were willing to transact for this last Christmas Eve. One other notable thing besides the winter pricing here is the summer pricing last year, where you'll see that in June, July, and August of last year, times that there has not historically been much of a difference between the national benchmark price and the local price. We saw very substantial price differences. I remember one day in early June last year, same-day gas was trading over $20, where gas at Henry Hub was about $5 or $6. So we're starting to see this relatively new phenomenon of summer local gas price spikes as well. This next slide, I won't go too deep into it, but what this shows is standing at any point in time since on any week of the year from 2018 on, if you said, I want to lock my Transco capacity cost for the coming 12 months, what would that cost me per decatherm of gas? And so most of the time over the past 6 years, that was something around 70 cents. And then we saw it get north of $5 last year for a few reasons that we'll get into in two slides. But this next slide, where I'm going to talk about the economic impact of this kind of abstract idea, we're going to use an example of a mid-sized manufacturer that uses 1,000 decatherms a day. And this would be someone like a pharmaceutical company, a brick plant, a flooring laminate company. That's kind of the industrial size we're talking about. And it's important to note here that that hypothetical pharmaceutical company is competing on a world scale and has to be competitive with their energy costs. So in this example of capacity costs, that pharmaceutical company would have paid in the summer of 2021 for the coming 12 months, they would have paid about $250,000 a year for their pipeline capacity. If they would have done that today, it would be about $800,000 a year. And if they'd done it at the peak of this blue line on the prior slide, that cost would have been over $2 million a year. So a single mid-sized facility would have been paying over $2 million a year just for the pipeline capacity. That doesn't even include the molecules. So the drivers of this price volatility, a big one is increased natural gas usage for power generation, and I won't belabor that point. I'm sure we've all read plenty about that. Lack of new pipelines in the Southeast, population growth in the Southeast, and that's an important one here because as folks move here to this wonderful state, they expect to have gas service. They expect to move into homes that have the availability of cheap energy, and when they move here, that's one more firm, non-interruptible customer, and that makes the supply balance just a little bit tighter for every industrial out there looking for non-interruptible supply. And then last summer, when we saw these price spikes, we had an unplanned outage on the Sonat pipeline at the exact same time that we had an unplanned, unusual constraint on the Transco pipeline. And so the southeastern states were essentially islanded from an energy perspective. There were also constraints from Transco flowing south, and so it was just very difficult to get the amount of molecules here in the Carolinas, which is why we saw molecules trading for $20 last summer when they were $5 at Henry Hub. So those compressor maintenance issues, those are complete. They were complete last fall. But then we had rolling blackouts on Christmas Eve, and that evidences the lack of natural gas pipeline capacity. As I said, there were some molecules available for sale, but there were not enough to power the size of power plants that were looking for them. We also really dodged a bullet. I can say that despite the rolling blackouts on Christmas Eve, in that if that extreme weather had arrived a few days earlier, say Tuesday, December 20th, the blackouts would have been massive and prolonged. So the fact that so many industrial facilities were already down at that point really bailed out the states. As far as power generation goes, we've hit on this before, but this chart shows the importance of natural gas, particularly the green line for winter capacity. So natural gas being the source that can scale up and generate electrons very, very quickly, where something like nuclear obviously cannot do that. Aubrey had mentioned the uniqueness of South Carolina, and there are two major utilities here. Piedmont, serving the counties that Transco natural gas pipeline runs directly through. And so those counties receive gas through Piedmont directly from Transco. But most other LDCs in the state need Carolina gas transmission to move that gas deeper into the state. And so the existence of Carolina gas transmission is unusual compared to other states such as Georgia or North Carolina that receive their gas directly from very large interstate gas pipelines. Notable constraints, we'd mentioned Sonat and how it's fully subscribed and there's not a liquid market at the end of the line. Carolina Gas is also fully subscribed, and that's really the choke point, like I said, between these long-haul pipelines and South Carolina's utilities. Carolina Gas is also constrained right next to the Jasper power plant in its ability to bring more supply in from the Savannah area. And one thing to appreciate about these FERC-regulated pipelines is that they are unable to build more capacity proactively. They require a firm contract with a counterparty, with a customer, to go out and build more capacity. So this is not a problem that Carolina Gas can solve by just going out and building more pipe. The governor's goals, I thought, were very clear and forward-looking, and we wanted to address a couple ways that we thought we could work towards those goals. The simplest one would be an expansion of the Sonat pipeline that feeds Carolina Gas Transmission in Aiken. As we mentioned, that pipe is essentially shaped like a funnel, so you would have to build back to some extent. It wouldn't just be the last mile, but that is a large bottleneck that could be solved here. And a new power plant in the Low Country, like has been proposed, could easily take 200,000 decatherms a day. And so the people considering building those power plants should request additional pipeline capacity on Sonat, as well as Carolina Gas, to make sure that they have the ability to bring that gas further into the state. A slightly more creative solution would have a role for the state in that, let's say a power generator needs 200,000 decatherms a day. The state could also sign up to be an anchor subscriber for, let's say, 200,000 decatherms a day and use that to continue incentivizing industry to come to this great state. And in the ensuing 5 to 7 to 10 years it would take for that pipeline to be built, there would be no payment from the state. And perhaps by the time that pipeline reaches completion, the state could have parceled out that capacity to new job-creating industries who would take that obligation on themselves. With that, Mr. Hilliard and I would be delighted to answer any questions from Madam Chair or the Commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Gray and Mr. Hilliard. Commissioners, questions on the presentation? We appreciate you being here today. I think you've given us some good information. Appreciate you sharing your expertise with us. Ms. Given, anything from you?
No, nothing from ORS, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Well, gentlemen, Mr. Elliott, Mr. Gray, Mr. Hilliard, thank you very much for your presentation today, and I'm sure we'll be seeing y'all in the near future. So thank you
so
very much. And with that, we'll close this allowable ex parte communication briefing. Thank you.